Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Lena, for a wonderful presentation. I love the line, schools as centers of health and wellness for children. I think mindful eating, as you've demonstrated, takes a very complex issue that we can get discouraged about, and it changes it to something that we can be creative about and know that there are definitely things that we can do. I'm going to talk a little bit about mindful eating and how I got involved in mindful eating. So this is one of my favorite slides because it shows that kids are naturally mindful eaters, and I'll talk about research about that later. But my favorite picture is the little girl on the lower right-hand side who was thoroughly enjoying immersing herself in a jar of Nutella. It's that kind of joy and exploration that we want to bring back to mindful eating. It's not a matter of learning something new. It's something that we all knew when we were young. We knew how to do. And so that gives a lot of hope to people when they're learning mindful eating. It's actually relearning something that we know how to do. I'm a pediatrician, as we all are, Claudia and Lena. And this is why it matters to me. About 10 years ago, I began seeing obese children in my clinic, and it was very, very disturbing, of course, to realize that they had been infected by this epidemic of obesity, which affects their parents, and is now spreading around the world to children around the world. I travel to Japan a lot, and you never used to see obese people in Japan, but now you see obese children lining up for school. So it's very sad that this is spread around the world. One of the things we know is that the problem begins quite early in life. Upon entering kindergarten, 1 out of 7 kids are overweight and 1 out of 8 are obese. And by 8th grade, 1 out of 6 are obese. And if kids enter kindergarten overweight, then they're 4 times more likely to end up obese later in life. And other risk factors are high birth weight and lower economic status. Puts us at risk of having obesity in our children. Well, one of the distressing things for pediatricians is to realize that problems that used to be confined to adults, middle-aged and older adults, we're now seeing in children as a result of this epidemic of obesity. So children now are being diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, and weight-related respiratory issues, and fatty liver disease, which we never saw in children before, unless they had some congenital problem or hepatitis. Now we see as the most common liver-related disorder in children worldwide. And of course, the long-term consequences of this are expensive both for the child and the family, and also for our entire culture to take care of all of these weight-related issues. So as Lena mentioned, our fallback has always been, well, put them on a diet. If they're overweight or obese or out of balance with food, put them on a diet. But the medical research is quite clear that diets in general do not work. This is a meta-analysis of various studies on diets. And it turns out that people who are on diets can lose some weight, usually 8 to 10 pounds, but they gain it back within a year or 2. So the authors concluded that the benefits of dieting are simply too small, and the potential harms of dieting are too large for us to recommend it as a state of obesity, and particularly for children. We don't want children to get into restrictive, unhappy patterns with food early in life. Now, what are the potential harms of dieting for children? Eating disorders. So in adolescent girls who dieted at a severe level, eating disorders were 18 times more likely to develop, and 5 times more likely in teens who dieted at a moderate level. And this is really important. Dieting encourages a shift from reliance on our internal physiological cues, hunger and fullness, to an external locus of control, meaning calories, diet plans, weighing in, and so on. So mindful eating is a way to return to the wisdom of our body and relearn what we once knew as children. and also something that we want children to stay in touch with for their entire life. Ideally, mindful eating will be taught to children and will be preventive for their entire life, like immunization against falling out of harmony with eating. One of the things that recent research shows is that food preferences are set early. And in fact, far from children being picky eaters, we actually teach children what they like to eat. The research is very clear on this. Breastfed infants are more accepting of new foods than bottle-fed infants. Babies who drink any sugar-sweetened drinks, like apple juice and so on, are twice as likely to drink them when they get to kindergarten. And babies who drink sugar-sweetened drinks several times a week are twice as likely to become obese by age 6. So the apple juice in the bottle is not a good idea if we want to prevent obesity. And that's something simple that we can teach to families. No sugary drinks. So we, as adults, teach kids what they like to eat. And parents can help infants learn to enjoy healthy foods. It turns out that infants learn their mother's dietary preferences before birth because flavors are transmitted into amniotic fluid, which the infant swallows and can taste, and also into breast milk. So there's a wonderful study where they took mothers and fed them various things. In one case, they had them drink carrot juice in the last trimester of pregnancy, and then also during lactation. And they found that those infants who breastfed accepted carrot-flavored cereal more readily than infants who had not been exposed to carrot juice in utero and during lactation. And the conclusion of this study was the best predictor of how many fruits and vegetables children will eat is how well they enjoy those flavors, and they enjoy those flavors because they've been exposed to them even before birth, during nursing, and early in life. This is a wonderful study in which they fed children their first solid foods. Green beans was one of the foods they fed them, and applesauce. And they recorded the facial expressions of these children exposed to novel foods. And they have a very cute recording system for these various things that are called grimace, or eyebrow lift, or eyebrow down, or the last one on the right, on the bottom on the right is called gape, and the number E on the left on the bottom is called lip curl. And it turns out that all infants exposed to novel foods will exhibit these expressions. It does not mean that the children do not like the food. Often the parents interpret it that the children don't like the food, and so they won't feed the child that food again. But the research shows that if you take children who react like this to a novel food, and you just keep feeding it to them, within about 5 or 6 tries, they will begin to accept the food and pull it into their mouths and actually enjoy it. I watched that happen on an airplane. I saw a baby who was sitting next to me fed her first bananas, and she gave the gape and the grimace, and then they just kept shoveling the mashed banana back in, and pretty soon she was accepting it and happy with it. So this is something we have to teach parents, that they shouldn't be deterred, as the bottom line says, by an initial negative response to a food. Just keep putting it back in, and gradually children get used to this taste. And if you want to have fun, just go on YouTube and look up videos of kids exposed to lemons for the first time. And you get, of course, negative faces. But ice cream does the same. You get the same kind of adverse reaction from kids when they're eating ice cream for the first time. So Julie Manella at the Manel Chemical Senses Center, which is looking at flavors and so on, has done this research with children, and her conclusion is keep offering fruits and vegetables. Don't worry about the facial expression. As you keep feeding it, look at how the child is willing eventually to take the food in and then becomes eager, actually. This is some very sweet information from the New York Times about kids in different places and the kind of breakfast they eat, which also proves that we teach children what to like. So here's Saki, age 2.5, who lives in Tokyo, and here's her breakfast. Squash, egg omelet, grilled salmon, pickled cucumber, fermented soybeans, which I have not learned to eat, even though I travel in Japan, because they're very gooey and sticky. And her family said that the first 6 times they gave it to her, she refused it. But on the 7th time, she took it in. In Malawi, and she has for breakfast cornmeal porridge with soy and peanut flour for extra protein, onion and garlic cornmeal fritters, sweet potatoes, and a drink made from hibiscus flowers. And here's Britta in Iceland. She has oat porridge with sour milk on it. How many of our kids would now be introduced to sour milk on their cereal? But if it's introduced early, kids love it. Maple syrup and a swig of cod liver oil for extra vitamin D. And it turns out that kids who are given cod liver oil regularly actually end up enjoying it and licking their lips, as Britta is doing. So I've said before that children are intuitive eaters, born intuitive eaters. And there's research actually dating back to 1939, this research study by Davis, indicating that under conditions that minimize adult attempts to control how much and what children eat, children will adjust their food and energy intake. A balanced diet, the appropriate amount of calories, and a balance in the micronutrients in their food. And Davis did this research in 1939 using orphans in her care, and she would sit them down in high chairs at every three times a day for meals and put an assortment of healthy foods on their trays. For instance, chopped liver, fish, assortment of vegetables and fruits. And then she recorded what the kids ate. And over the course of a week, they would eat a balanced diet. But on any one day, they might eat just potatoes, which of course, if that happens at home, then parents feel like, oh no, they didn't get any protein today or any vitamin C, and so parents naturally begin to interfere with what the child is eating. So it takes patience to let children self-select their diets. And of course, the food has to be good food. And Davis reports a case of one little boy who came in with severe rickets, and he ate liver at every meal for several months until his rickets were cured, radiologically cured. And then his intake of liver went way down. So that was proof to her that there's an instinct in children about what foods they need to eat. Now, on the right, we have the parent who's worried that the child is not eating well and is restraining the child and trying to force them to eat what the parent thinks they should eat. On the left, we have a parent who's ignoring the child, put the food down in front of them and gone off to do something else, and is letting the child have a thoroughly enjoyable experience with eating. So many families might not have the patience to let a child mess around with the food, finger paint with the food. But you can see how much that child is enjoying what they're eating. So the research shows, and this is from the journal Pediatrics, that if parents try to control strictly what kids are eating, you can actually increase children's preferences for high-fat, energy-dense foods. And you can limit their acceptance of a variety of foods and disrupt their own wisdom about regulating what they eat and how much they eat. And this occurs when well-intentioned parents, as Lena said, our parents are well-intentioned and doing the best they can. We just need to help educate them. So they're concerned and they assume that children need help in determining how much to eat. And so they impose their own ideas on the child. And the child doesn't develop the opportunity to self-control what they're eating. This is a wonderful example from the research of Barbara Rolls. So she took 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds and served them great, huge helpings of macaroni and cheese. And the 3-year-olds would eat an appropriate amount and then walk away from the macaroni and cheese. But by age 5, the children would make a valiant attempt to eat the entire huge portion of macaroni and cheese because they had already been influenced by societal pressure to clean their plate. And they were eating an inappropriate amount. So very early on, adults are influencing children to eat out of balance with their own body's wisdom and harmony. This leads to a very important question when I do mindful eating workshops with adults. Who serves the food to the kids and therefore determines portion sizes? And I find many people who have had difficulty with food have a childhood situation where the adult served food to kids and the child could not choose the food that they ate or determine the portion size. And not only that, the adult served even a food that they knew the child didn't like and then insisted that the child had to eat all of it or they were punished, which is a real setup for problems later in life. So I'm very fond of Ellen Satter and her philosophy about feeding children. She has a wonderful website with recommendations for feeding children of different ages starting in infancy. But this is her basic philosophy, her basic premise, and it's really helpful to give this idea to parents. If they want rules, people always want rules. This is one rule that I would say is an okay rule. Parents are responsible for the what, the when, and the where of feeding. That means parents determine what foods are served, when they're served, and where they're served. And then the children's part of the responsibility is how much and whether, meaning the children determine whether they will eat a food or not, and if they eat it, how much they will eat. And that's left totally up to the child. So this is a very beautiful thing to talk to parents about, and I actually had a pediatrician in one of our workshops, professional workshops, and she had a young child who was very thin, and she was very worried he wasn't on the growth chart or hanging on by his toenails to the growth chart. And so she was restricting his food and trying to determine how much he should eat. And her grandmother was saying, the child's grandmother, her mother was saying, no, he's got enough wisdom to know how to eat. And when she saw this rule of Ellen Satter's, she was convinced that the grandmother was actually right and that she should let go of her anxiety about how much her child was eating. Family meals are really important. What children want is quality time with their parents. Quality time means that you're there, you're present, you're talking, you're enjoying each other. So if parents invite curiosity and investigation around eating and make eating fun, then kids will relax into eating and enjoy eating naturally. And if parents can create quality time around food and eating together, then you're nourishing a healthy eater. Healthy both in their bodies, but also in their hearts, in their emotions around eating, and in their intelligence about eating. So there's a review of research on family meals published by Cornell, which can be very useful. But family meals are really important. Happy, relaxed times with kids are really important. And in some traditions, even religious traditions, they have at least one family meal a week. And of course, it'd be nice to have more. So we encourage parents to grow food together with children. We know that children who grow food are much more interested in sampling the food, trying that food out, excited about the food. We encourage families to cook food with their children and let the children have the fun of cooking and finding out what something tastes like after it's been baked or cooked on the stove, and then eating and enjoying together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jan. This is such a rich presentation. I'm delighting that I can be here and hosting it. Next, we are going to have Claudia Vega, and I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter, Claudia, and you can pull up your screen. And Claudia is going to be speaking about her experiences using mindfulness as a tool to help children and teenagers deal with the stress of daily life, stay tuned into their bodies, and make healthier choices around eating. So we're delighted to have Claudia. You'll need to unmute yourself, and we'll turn the microphone over to you, as it were.